You know what paralyzed me in my 20s? This idea that I had to be perfectly mature, perfectly healed, and perfectly ready before God would bring the right relationship. I spent years in this perfectionism trap, thinking it, I spent years in this perfectionism trap, thinking if I prayed enough, if I healed enough, then I would be ready for marriage. But here's what I wish someone had told me. Marriage preparation isn't about perfection. It's about embracing progress. The moment I stopped waiting to be perfect and started to prepare where I was, that is the moment that everything shifted. God doesn't need you to be perfectly ready. He needs you to be purposely preparing. I once dated a guy that within the first 2 to 3 months, he was already talking about marriage. This was during a time when I thought that I had to be perfect, and I was kind of um, working on the things that I needed to work on, the things that I thought that I needed to work on within myself. I wasn't really committed to the process stuff. And I wasn't really sure if I really wanted to get married again. And so when he started to talk about marriage so early on, I told him that I didn't want to get married again. I had been married, I had given my all to someone, and I never wanted to feel the type of pain that I felt. I didn't know that I would ever be comfortable giving someone that much of my heart again. And we had a conversation, and I could tell that he was not happy with my answer. He asked, how is it fair for you to punish someone else for what your ex-husband did or didn't do? It's a valid point, but I just wasn't ready at that time. I didn't think that I was ready at that time. And we didn't stop seeing each other after that. But looking back now, I realized that he spent the remainder of that relationship punishing me for not being ready, or punishing me for telling him that I wasn't ready for marriage. This isn't one of those tales where I feel like I missed out, or this is the one that got away. Because later on in the relationship, I learned some things about him that let me know that we wouldn't have been a good fit either way. But it's just something that I was reminded of as I was preparing to do this talk. This concept that we have to do something or become someone in order to be ready for marriage, love, and relationships. And it's just not the case. There's a perfectionism paralysis syndrome that is happening with kingdom singles. I call it the perfectionism trap that I was stuck in for so many years. I mean, it looks spiritually mature on the surface. I just want to be completely ready before God brings someone. But here's the truth. That mindset keeps you stuck. The perfectionism trap shows up in three areas. The first is healing perfectionism. I need to be completely healed from every past hurt. And how many of you know that you're not ever completely healed? Healing is like peeling away the layers of an onion. Every time you peel away a layer, something else is revealed. And we go through this process as we live, as we love, as we learn, we continue to heal layers of ourselves. And so, if we are evolving, if we're growing, if you're alive, you should be continuously growing, then you're never going to be completely healed. The second perfectionism trap is the maturity perfectionism trap. I need to have every character issue resolved. When the reality is, our relationships are mirrors, and they help to shine a light on the parts of ourselves that we keep hidden, those parts of ourselves that are in the shadows, that are not often exposed to the light. And when you're in a relationship, that those parts of yourselves are now exposed to the light, your help those parts of yourself are now exposed to the light, and we know that some wounds cannot heal until they are exposed to the light. Just as I talked about how we are always in a state of healing, we are always in a state of developing our character so that it can reflect God's character. And again, some parts of your character won't be developed or exposed to the light until you're in a relationship. The third perfectionism trap is the purpose perfectionism trap. We sometimes think that we need complete clarity on our purpose before we consider marriage. But what if your purpose won't manifest until you are in that relationship, that mirror that's going to reflect the areas that need refining? What if you won't come into complete alignment with your purpose until you open your heart and your life to the possibility of partnership? All of these perfectionism traps sound godly, but they actually become excuses that keep us in a perpetual state of stagnation. Why? Because complete perfection never comes in this lifetime. Let me be clear. Preparation matters deeply, but preparation is a process. It's not a destination. In my own journey, I spent years in what I call intensive preparation. I was going through deliverance. I was working on healing. I was working on character development. All of those are good things. But it wasn't until I got into the relationship with Honey that I learned just how much more work that I had to do. I had unconsciously created this checklist of things that I had to master before I was ready for marriage. The turning point came during prayer when God gently reminded me, if you're waiting to be perfectly healed before you're ready for marriage, you'll never be ready. It was confronting, but liberating. I remember coming home after my marriage didn't work out and we had to be separated for a year and just being filled with so much anger. I was angry, I was embarrassed, I was unsure of what my next step should be. My ex-husband had moved on and, he was living his life. And here I was back at home, surrounded by the people who loved me, but I didn't feel like I belonged anymore. And I had a conversation with my aunt one day, and this aunt, she never treated me like a little girl. Like when I was around this aunt, I could be a little bit older. And here we were, two women who had loved, who had been heartbroken, and we were sitting there. I was talking about some of the things that happened in my marriage, and I was just talking about how angry I was. And my aunt said, "You're hurt. You're hurt. Your heart is broken, and that is okay." And in that moment, it felt like a weight was lifted from my shoulders because I had never really given voice to the true emotion that I was feeling. I identified with the anger, but anger is a secondary emotion. And before you feel that, you felt something else. And so the weight of the embarrassment, the weight of the shame, the weight of the disappointment that things didn't work out the way that I wanted them to work out. In that moment, I felt the release. My aunt had given me the words for what I was really feeling and what that really was with hurt. Now, I would love to say that I began the journey to really heal that hurt at that moment, but I didn't. I packed it away. For many, many years, I still operated from that place of that hurt. So when God challenged me about trying to be perfectly ready for marriage, I thought back on that moment and I wondered how things could have fared differently if I had taken the time in that moment to work through the hurt. And I thought about the women in my family who had gone through similar things and their relationships didn't work out, their marriage didn't work. And I wondered what type of support system they had. I wondered if they thought about trying to give me the type of support that they wish they had had in their moments. Because nobody was prepared to support them. I think that a lot of times, especially as women, we think that that's just par for the course, right? You're going to get hurt at some point and you just pick up and you move on. Sometimes it's not that simple. And so I realized that I had started to use preparation as this perfectionism mechanism. I was determined that I was never going to feel that level of hurt again. And so if I was just prepared enough, I could ensure that it wouldn't happen and I could protect my heart in that way. It was my way of trying to guarantee a perfect marriage without risk. How many of you know that that doesn't exist, right? Perfect marriages don't exist. A marriage without risk does not exist because Giving someone your heart is also giving them almost the permission to hurt. So the truth is, some healing happens in the relationship, not before it. There are many parts of my heart that were broken in my first marriage that weren't healed until I got into my relationship with Honey. I wonder if he knows how much he healed my heart. I wonder how much I healed his heart. Some growth only comes through connection, not in isolation. Some purpose clarity only comes through partnership, not in independent striving. So this wasn't permission to enter into a relationship unprepared, but it was freedom from the paralysis of perfection. When we look at biblical examples of preparation, we notice something very interesting. No one was perfectly ready. Esther had to undergo 12 whole months of preparation. And it wasn't to become perfect, it was so that she could be positioned properly. Even Joseph, he spent years in preparation. All of those years where he was in prison, where he was in Pharaoh's house, those years were in preparation. It refined his character. It healed some of the hurts of the betrayal from his brothers. But none of that was perfectly developed until the elevation motion. So the biblical pattern isn't perfection before promotion, it's positioning through preparation. So this reveals three powerful preparation principles. Principle number one, progress over perfection. God looks for direction, not perfection. Are you growing? Are you moving forward? That matters more than arriving at some imaginary finish line. Principle number two, positioning over preference. Biblical preparation focuses more on positioning than personal preference. Where God has you matters more than where you wish you were. Principle number three, purpose over perception. True preparation is about aligning with God's others, not meeting others' perceptions of readiness. These principles liberate us from the perfectionism trap while still honoring the importance of preparation. So, how do we embrace preparation without falling into the trap of perfectionism? Let me share 3 practical shifts that elevated my. Shift number 1 is from checklist to process. Remember, I told you I had this list of things that I was actively working down the list to make sure that I was perfectly prepared for marriage. But how many times do we focus so much on the destination that we don't take time to celebrate how far we've come? That we don't take time to think about, wow, 5 years ago, I would have reacted or responded to that situation much differently than I reacted today. That's a cause for celebration. You want to make sure that you're taking time and asking yourself, am I actively engaging in the areas where I need to progress? Instead of asking, have I resolved every issue? The second shift is from independence to interdependence. You want to make sure that you're understanding that complete self sufficiency is not the goal. Healthy relationships require interdependence, not independence. You're going to have to depend on one another. You want to ask yourself, am I learning to connect healthily? Instead of asking, can I function perfectly on my own? Shift number three is from future Shift number 3 is from future focus to present positioning. Stop preparing for some hypothetical future and start embracing your current position. Ask, am I faithful where I am? Rather than am I where I want to be? These shifts create momentum instead of paralysis. They honor the preparation process while also releasing the perfectionism pressure. I encourage you to honestly assess, has getting ready become an excuse for not moving forward? Has the fear of not being perfectly prepared kept you from purposeful positioning? Remember, preparation is not about arrival, it's about alignment. Looking back, I recognize how much time I lost to this perfectionism trap. Waiting to be perfectly healed, perfectly mature, perfectly ready. What I've learned is this: preparation matters deeply, but perfection is never the requirement. I could go back and tell my younger self something, it would be this: stop waiting to be perfect and start preparing with purpose. The question isn't, am I perfectly ready? But am I purposefully preparing? Perhaps your breakthrough isn't waiting for perfect readiness. Purposeful God isn't ready. Perhaps God isn't waiting for you to have it all together, but to engage the process with your whole heart. For those who are ready to break free from the perfectionism trap and start your journey of purposeful preparation, my Kingdom Elevation Roadmap is available in the link below. It's time to stop waiting for perfection and start preparing with purpose.